What's the biggest bust-up you've ever had with an owner?
He wrote to my chairman, John Dennis, at Barnsley, a letter and, complaining about it. I said, well, I'll reply to it. And I did, and I just wrote bollocks on his letter and sent it back to him. All of a sudden, the phone rang and Elton said, a bit like the Mafia, he said, Derek's on his way round to pick you up because John Reed, his agent, lived not far from me. He's come round, we've got to have a chat. So I knew, I just said, well, this is it. I remember going to Bordeaux with Nottingham Forest when I was manager, and they treated me well. But when I went to Manchester United, I was in the boardroom and I was in another level. And I thought, hold on a minute, managers, as a scout for Manchester United, I was getting treated better than the manager at Nottingham Forest.
So it will come as a surprise to people that you have issues with anxiety.
My wife can't understand, I'm not the guy that she married and went on and everything else. Sometimes you have to put your hand up and say, I've got that wrong.
Hello, you're listening to Sacked with me, Neil Ashton, the show that takes you behind the power, the politics and the pressure of the Premier League. Joining me in the owner's box today, it's football royalty, Dave Bassett. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Dave, thanks very much for joining us in here. Okay, let's have a look at your CV. Okay, only a handful of managers. You've taken charge of 1,000 matches.
Yeah.
Inducted into the League Managers Association Hall of Fame. Achieved 7 promotions in your career as a manager. You took Wimbledon from 4th division to the top flight in 5 years. You led Wimbledon to one of their highest ever finishes, 6th in the top flight. Back-to-back promotions with Sheffield United from 3rd division to the 1st, reached an FA Cup semi-final at Wembley with the Blades, reached a playoff final at Wembley with Palace and with Barnsley, and took Nottingham Forest back to the Premier League. You won Division 1 at the City Ground. An amazing career, distinguished career, glittering career, and great to have you with us. And with a resume like that, Dave, you definitely deserve to be in the owner's box here today. Let's get straight into it. Crisis Club FC. They were in crisis 3 matches ago. Michael Carrick's taken over at Manchester United as an interim. That's a position you've been in twice in your career, once with Leicester and once with Southampton. What does it feel like to be the interim manager? Is it a position and a job where you just cannot lose?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know that you're not going to get the job, basically, if they put you as caretaker manager, which was the case. And each club, I was there as caretaker for sort of 4 or 5 weeks. But I knew at the end they were going to appoint a manager and I would be leaving the club because that was the case of what it was. So I was quite relaxed with it. It wasn't in a position where I knew that I was trying to get the job at all. Whereas Michael Carrick, he's been put in for 6 months to do a job, and that's a good period of time to do it. It's a slightly different situation, I think.
Does being the interim, what are the differences when you go into work every day as a manager when you are effectively holding the baby? I think Frank Lampard used that phrase, babysitting. He used that
well, you
phrase
don't. When I was
Chelsea.
interim manager, I was the manager. I was making decisions. As a manager, I made decisions, and Carrick will be doing that. You won't be trying to play act in a situation. Mm-hmm. You can't pretend to do. You've got a job to do, and you've got to do it to the best of your ability. You're being paid that money. When I was at Southampton and Leicester, I wanted to make sure that I got the best results for the club, so that when you hand it over, the club hasn't just sort of lost 4 games or 5 games on the trot because nobody cares. I think anybody who becomes the manager, as an interim, you possibly could hope it. But in my instances, I knew and was experienced enough to know that I was just holding the fort till the next guy came in.
Yeah. You know what a big club. We all know what the size of Manchester United, but you've worked with them or for them under Sir Alex Ferguson very, very briefly when you weren't working as a manager. What are the key differences between being involved with Manchester United and being involved with some of the other clubs that you actually managed?
Well, when I left Nottingham Forest, in difficult times, which I don't think I deserved to suffer with that, there was one bone of contention with getting the sack when I think I was treated badly by the club. But Alex came on and said, look, come and do some scouting for me, do that. And I thought, this is great. And I travelled, looked after first class, going to places like Amsterdam, Bordeaux, Paris to watch games. And there Yeah, and it was good, and I mean, I felt and I realised that a big club as it was. I mean, one of the funny things is I remember going to Bordeaux with Nottingham Forest when I was manager, and they treated me well. But when I went to Manchester United, I was in the boardroom and I was in another level, and I thought, hold on a minute, managers. As a scout for Manchester United, I was getting treated better than the manager of Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, no, amazing experience. Can you remember who you watched for Sir Alex?
Alex was looking for goalkeepers, and I did watch them several times and put in reports. And there was other players who I was asked to go and see. Nobody in particular. There was one or two that, if I was covering a game, can you have a look at it and see what you think of that? But I was treated very well, and I was grateful to Alex, and it led into all of a sudden in the summer I wanted to get back into management, and Barnsley came along, so I appreciated that.
Yeah, I have to say, Sir Alex, you know him obviously a lot better than I do, but he's got those classy touches about him.
Yeah,
because when you're out, and what I mean by that is when you're out of work, that he picked up the phone to you and said he's going to effectively keep you in work and keep you in the game and in the cycle of the game, and he asked you to go and do some work for him by scouting. He signed 2 of those players eventually, Van der Sar via Fulham,
and
Barthez from Monaco.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, well, it was nice to be respected. I mean, if Alex rings you up and, he's not going to ask you to do something if he thinks you're inadequate or not possible. And I know he's done that for several people. And again, he's been around. He's part of the league managers. There's the Alec Ferguson's award at the end of the season.
Sure.
And, I mean, I've got on well with him. We've had a few arguments. I can't say we haven't, but there's part and parcel.
Don't worry, Dave. We all have over the years.
But the good thing was, when you've done that, is at the end of the game, win, lose or draw, he comes and has a glass of red wine or invites you in, and that's put aside.
You just mentioned that. That tradition, I think, has disappeared, hasn't it? I mean, of going into a respective manager's office after a game and having a glass of wine. I mean, it used to be very, very traditional, and the media definitely, when I was part of that, would make a big thing of it, of would Arsene Wenger going to Sir Alex's office after a game. I don't hear about that anymore. Do you think that tradition still exists?
I don't really know. I don't think so. I don't get the impression that they go in. They may do, but then there's extra needs with the press. The press was important then in those days. We used to go and do it, and then you went in and had a drink with them. The same was Everton with Howard Kendall, people like that, George Graham. It was part and parcel that you went in, and whatever happened in the game, you'd have a bit of a laugh about it.
On that, how long would it take you to? I'll be honest, I couldn't do it. I mean, I'll have a drink with you next week.
Yeah.
But if you've just beaten me 3-0 at Goodison Park and Howard Kendall's team has just played my team off the park, to the idea of going into Howard's office for a beer after the game for me. Unthinkable. Next week, fine, when I've cooled down, but not half an hour. I don't know how you guys do. I don't know how you guys did it.
Well, no, you've got to deal with it, Alex. I remember at Sheffield United, we beat him a couple of times, and he came in and said, "Well played." And the same. I always felt, if I've lost the game, you go in. You can't hold it against the manager. That's his job. You're trying to do it. To go in and sort of do that. I mean, you have a laugh, and I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. And whilst you sort of on the field, you want to win, and you're determined, and you can, as I say, you can have a few words with one another and disagree, and that's got to be forgotten. I mean, for example, I know some managers, like Howard Wilkinson, if they didn't go well, they wouldn't go out on Saturday night. I went out every Saturday night, bar about 6 in the time I was manager. It wasn't my wife's fault, so I can't ruin her night for going out on a Saturday for all the work. And so you put that behind you. I can wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and start thinking about that.
So you'd be able to put it to one side?
Yeah. Yeah, it's part and parcel. It's part of competition.
Yep.
You don't see, Djokovic hitting Carlos over the head with a tennis racket at the end of the game, do you? It probably feels like it, but he acts in a very professional and dignified way.
Yeah. No, I think that's the bit I'd struggle with, being dignified and respectful, Dave, to be honest.
But you'd have enemies, because if you got that, you'd get a reputation and you wouldn't get the invite in.
Yeah.
So you learn a lot, going in the boot room at Liverpool after with Joe Fagan and Ronnie Moran and Evans. It was great. They treated you with respect, and it was brilliant.
Don't get me wrong. I like the concept. The concept I like, and it's obviously an English football tradition, particularly. But I would just struggle. I would struggle to do it.
I don't get the feeling. I might be wrong. I don't know, but I don't get the feeling.
I'm going to look into it because I'm not sure. I'm not sure myself. But in my previous existence, I would make a massive thing of, Arsene, you're going to go into Sir Alex's office afterwards. You're going to take him a bottle of wine, and Mourinho would do it.
Well, when we played Arsenal, it was George Graham would have you in, but Arsene didn't invite you in. And at all. So that was the way.
I think I'll be a bit more like Arsene. Manchester United, it's a huge club. Obviously, Sir Alex Ferguson still involved, still involved in the sense that he's still watching matches from the director's box. The stand's named after him opposite, and quite rightly so. He's got huge, the reverence is clear and deserved because he's such a successful manager. 13 Premier League titles, extraordinary. But it's such a big club. Do you ever regret or rue an opportunity or mischance to manage a big club? Would your methods and your management have been suited to managing a club at the very, very highest level?
I think the top level one, two of those clubs, I would be apprehensive because I felt that I didn't have the sort of career as a player that would necessarily be recognised by the top players. And, I know there's other managers, Van Gaal and all that have done it on the coaching because there's a different mentality. But I think I was apprehensive, and I did turn down one or two clubs that I look back now and think I should have gone and done it because I think I might have gone into the dressing room and that there would have been this sort of distinct situation, that you've come from where you are, but you haven't played at the top level, which is wrong, really. That was perhaps just a weakness in me that was thinking, I was apprehensive, and certain clubs were there, and I had a couple of chances, but again, probably there was decisions I made. I was being too loyal to the clubs I was with to move on, whereas now, you'd have to change because it's like Rob Edwards at Wolves. He's got to take that job. He's got to go from Middlesbrough. It's a life-changing challenge for him. That sets himself up. That even if they get relegated and they don't get promoted the next 2 seasons, all right, he's probably going to go. But then he's got a defining situation where he's secured his future.
Mm-hmm. Who did you turn down? Because I know some of your key characteristics and qualities, and one of them you just mentioned there is loyalty. When you're stitched into an idea, the fabric of a situation, you obviously find it very, very difficult to let go and to walk away. And when you did at Wimbledon, you stayed at Palace for 48 hours before you went back. I'm not saying that was a big job, but that sort of showed in terms of your loyalty and your belief in what you were doing with another football club. But which clubs did you turn down where you could have gone and worked at the highest level?
When I kept Sheffield United up in that first season where we hadn't won for 17 games or anything, at the end of that season, Doug Ellis came to me from Aston Villa and offered me the job. But I felt loyalty to Wimbledon. They'd stayed with me, because in this day and age, probably now, if you don't win 8 games or something, you get the sack. Whereas, I managed to come and we finished 13th that year, which was remarkable. And I just felt that Sheffield United was good, and I felt they were in a good place to push on, but that wasn't the case. They didn't push on. So I probably, again, I must have made a couple of decisions. And I should have gone to Blackburn when I was at Barnsley. I'd only been at Blackburn from the start of the season, after working with Alex, and they came in and again they offered me more wages and everything else. But I felt, I was actually being disloyal to Barnsley. They'd given me, John Dennis, the chairman, had offered me the job and everything else, and all of a sudden I'm going to ditch him halfway through. Now I look back, my wife said I was stupid, I should have done it. She was definitely against it, and probably I should have done with hindsight.
But we all have decisions that we regret, but you obviously had an amazing managerial career. But let's talk about some of the moments where perhaps it hasn't gone well, where it hasn't gone as well for you, and that you have been sacked. What do any of them do any of them continue to hurt? Obviously, at the time, it does.
Yeah,
There's short.
you can see them. You can see the signs when it's coming and everything else. You know, it's a bit like a terminal. You get there, and all of a sudden you realise that you've been to see the doctor and you've got a terminal illness, and you know that the end is when it is. It's not if, it's when.
What are the signs? Okay, what were the signs? What would you pick up on?
Well, when I went to Watford, for example, they didn't want me. I didn't know that. It was my first move. I hadn't moved around. It seemed ideal. When Elton John turns up in your house and all of a sudden he's offering you the job, all of a sudden there's a bit of influence, and he's very influential and wanted, I've got to have an answer tomorrow. Graham Taylor's going to Aston Villa. We'd like you to come. And the problem is Elton hadn't sort of mentioned it to the rest of the board. He didn't need to, but I went there, and all of a sudden the local paper didn't like me, and I realised pre-season that all of a sudden, you know, Watford weren't welcoming me with open arms, and there was an anti-fans from the day one, and also John Barnes was sold, and then I had players like Kevin Richardson who wanted to go to Arsenal, Mark Falco wanted to go to Glasgow Rangers, Dave Barsley wanted to go to QBR. They were all leaving the boat to go, so Graham knew a bit about something that I didn't. And I realised, and I came back from pre-season, and I realised I'd left Wimbledon in a miles better position with a better team than Watford. And I just said to my wife, I said, we're going to struggle with this one. So I knew, and of course the results didn't come, and the fans were agitated, and, you know, the local paper put it down that I wasn't a family man and Watford was a family club and everything else.
You're definitely a family man. There's no one would question that.
Yeah, well, that's right. But, I had some history. When I was 21, I ran a Sunday side in Watford, and we won a few cups, and all of a sudden, you know, there was criticism that we were dirty, and this Oliver Phillips, who was the local guy, brought all these things up, and I just knew that it was building up. And I went to a presentation one evening after the game, and the atmosphere in there, it wasn't toxic word then, but it was the atmosphere, and Christine was with me, and she's never felt so bad and everything else. And but in sense of it was a great dismissal, because Elton was a terrific...
If there ever can be a great dismissal, go on.
Yeah, well, Elton's a great guy, you know. He was having all problems himself at that particular time, divorcing Renato, and there was, he blocked himself in his house at Windsor and everything else. He was talking about selling it to Maxwell, and he was there. But anyway, it came up to Christmas, and I could sense time was nearly not far off, and nothing was said. Anyway, we played just after Christmas. We're a bit unlucky with a few results, and we played Manchester United at home, and Alex, and we actually murdered United. It was a good Tony Agana rang and run wild, and we lost 1-0. And it was Alex put his hand up and said, I don't know how we got away with that there. I went home, and I was due to have dinner with my father-in-law and mother-in-law and everything else, and I got in, and all of a sudden the phone rang, and Elton said, a bit like the Mafia, he said, Derek's on his way round to pick you up, because John Reed, his agent, lived not far from me. He's come round, we've got to have a chat. So I knew, I just said, well, this is it. So I went to John Reed's house, amazing house. I think they had a little chef halfway down the driveway. And we got there anyway. We went in, and he just, put his arms around me. He said, God, we're so unlucky today. And, Tony Agana was superb and everything else. And he just said, look, I'm going to have to do the business. I'm in a situation where it is, I feel the directors of the clubs have been horrible to you, you and your missus. He said, we're going to have to do it. And I said, yeah, all right, I understand that. He said, well, come on, we're going to have a good drink. And we did, and got a bit inebriated, and that was it. He said, but he didn't want me to do it then, because they were playing Hull in the FA Cup on the Saturday, and wanted the team and to do it. But not only did I got my contract paid to some extent, but Elton brought the car that I had, which was Graham Taylor's Jaguar, and gave that to me. And he also paid for me, Chris, and the girls to go to California for 2 weeks, and he paid the whole lot, every penny of it. And
Classy touch.
Class. He said he was sorry, the way I was treated, and that was part and parcel. So I couldn't complain because I was looked after very well, and he did it right, the way that he did it. He's there, not like when I was at Forest, Irving Scholar, who was director of football and everything else, I was won the championship. It's the only, other than Brian Clough, I'm the only person that's actually got silverware at Forest, and that we won it. And they were on the AIM market, and the shares hadn't done well. And instead of giving me what they were going to say, 8 to 10 million to spend on the team, they said we need £3 million. And what they then did, which is started to be unforgivable. Paul Pierre van Hooydonk decided to go on strike and everything else, and Irving Scholar liked Pierre van Hooydonk, but Kevin Campbell had done so well for us. Van Hooydonk and Campbell had done well, but I wanted to keep Kevin Campbell because Van Hooydonk was a difficult character, and it was going to be difficult because we'd probably be in the bottom half, and he wouldn't like that. And he was trying to suggest to a Scholar, sign this Dutch player, and everything else. And what happened is I agreed a contract with Kevin Campbell, and then went on holiday, and a week later I got a phone call from Scholar saying that Campbell had gone to Turkey. They'd come in. Well, I'd agreed for the wages with him, and the Turkish club were prepared to pay him that figure tax-free, and so Kevin took it. And Kevin rung me up and apologised and said, look, I went in Monday to sign it, went in Tuesday to sign it, went in Wednesday to sign it. He said there was always some excuse. He said, and then on a Thursday I found Turkey wanted there, so I went. So he's done that behind my back, so that didn't sit well with me, of doing that.
When it happens, so Forest obviously hurts, and still does, or you still remember it so lucidly. What's the recovery like, Dave?
Well,
when you're out of work, when you're in training ground every day, saying hello to everybody, working with the players, and then all of a sudden that element is taken away from you. How do you get through the next few days? How do you recover?
Well, they're not the best days of your life. No. You don't walk around, blowing up balloons and having a good laugh and everything else. You're there, and I was disappointed because even so, Mickey Adams and myself were at Preston watching Arsenal, who were coming up in the cup and everything else, and I got a phone call from a journalist on the way home to say, Ron Atkinson's coming in and you're gone. Now, like Elton, why didn't Scholar ring me? Why didn't he fly over from Monaco to come and tell me that, he was anxious to get me when I first came, and all of a sudden, the next morning I go in and Phil Saw, the chief exec, gives me a standard letter, thanks for your duties and all this, that and the other. And I thought that stunk. There was no respect. It'd be a bit man big enough to come in and say we've got to make a change.
Other than Elton, other than the way Elton sacked you, but is there actually a classy way to fire someone? I mean, how do you? Well,
you find out who is the people there. It should be the chairman or somebody of authority should get hold of you and say, look, it's. I mean, when you go to a club, you can get to know the directors and everything else. And I remember Michael Ragg, one at Sheffield United, Dave, and he was a really good lad. He said, Dave, we love you and everything else, but one day we're going to sack you probably. So, remember the good times. It's business, and I understand that.
You stopped managing in 2005?
Roughly, yeah. Probably. I can't remember.
Southampton, your last job as
I went
modern term interim, but caretaker at the time. Why? You were 60, 61 at the time. Why did you... I don't think it was an official retirement, and so it was more an unofficial retirement. You never said never, but... Why? That strikes me as such a young age.
I had a couple of offers, and perhaps I should have, one or two people felt that I packed up a bit early, but at the same time, I felt, perhaps it's time to call it a day and start seeing the rest of the world and take my wife out and have a bit of a life there. it was a decision that, you know, the jobs weren't massive jobs, but probably I might, you know, I haven't got regrets, but probably I could have done another job or two. You with me? But I think you can sometimes reach it, and I just got the feel that the feeling in the media and everything else that I was getting, that, you know, I was too old and a busted flush.
But you're right. I don't think you were. You had so much. I just think you had so much experience at seven promotions, which is a record that you held for an awful long time. No other manager in the history of English football had done that.
No, well, that's right. I mean, I'm proud of what I achieved, and with the promotions and the playoffs, and, you know, again, and what we did with Wimbledon. I mean, Wimbledon didn't get anywhere near the credit it should have done. You know, again, I think we've been wiped off the media side. That it's one of the most successful histories, you know, in football with what we did. We came into the league, and then all of a sudden we got to the top of the league and finished sixth in the quarter-final of the FA Cup in 9 years. I didn't really want to leave Wimbledon, but, you know, I was going to get more money, and I had to think of myself, because you know, at that stage I went for finishing you know, sixth in the quarter-finals. I got £6,000 bonus. You know, ridiculous, really.
You put a few noughts on that these days if you took a team to sixth in the top
Yeah,
five.
well, a lot of, I mean, you know, when I've spoken to other people and some foreigners, they said, you know, if you'd done what you'd done in Italy or France, you'd work for the rest of your life. Because that's you're regarded. Foreign coaches get more time, and, you know, the Italians, they change around. You know, how many clubs in Italy has Conte had? You know what I mean? And Ancelotti and everything else. Not saying they ain't good managers at all, but there's a lot of reverence and the managers.
Sure. Do you feel that football has forgotten you, or did forget you? And also, how has that manifested itself in more recent years?
Well, football forgets, you know, you're yesterday's man, you with me? I mean, I understand the game's on. I don't expect to be lauded or whatever it is, but I'm well respected wherever I go, you know. I mean, you know, most of the fans, I don't get any abuse. They usually laugh and everything else and say we enjoyed watching you and what you said to say. I think, you know, I come over, and I think people, you know, I am abrasive a bit and everything else. And I think that, you know, clubs have been frightened to have me, you with me, because I react to things, and, you know, if I'm there passionate about it, you know, I'm in charge, and, you know, I don't sort of like the idea. And I certainly couldn't work in this day and age as a manager where other people are buying all the players and giving me players what to do. I mean, you'd have people giving suggestions and pushing it and everything else, but without me seeing them or wanting to know and everything else, I wouldn't have just, well, yes, there's a bunch of players, and I could look at them and think, well, they're rubbish, you know. You know, I mean, it was difficult when I went to Leicester. You know, they'd spent Emil Heskey's money and everything else, and the team was rubbish. You know, there was a few good players. Muzzy, it was decent. Savage was all right, but they're over team, and that's why they were bottom of the league. And, you know, you're stuck. And the problem was there wasn't the money to change the team.
What are the biggest, since you left football, what are the biggest personal challenges that you faced away from the game?
Well, I mean, you go on. I mean, I was okay. I mean, you know, I've ended up you know, when I was 78, to prostate treatment that went well, and the cancer was gone. But unfortunately, it showed up that I had a bladder problem and a stricture as well, which has meant that, you know, it's not recovered as much. But, I mean, the good thing I've got to look on it is there's no cancer there. But I do have to, you know, have a few problems with looking after the situation. You know, it's ongoing, and, you know, I've got some damage to the bowel and on the radiation damage and everything else. You know, a little bit of anxiety as you get older, you with me, which comes in, which is, you know, a lot of people have got, as you get older, you're not as confident and you're not as dynamic as you were in your early days. You know, sometimes I forget I'm 81 and I still think I'm, you know, 45 or something, and I can do these things and can't quite understand. When I go for a walk and walk further, I come in fatigued and sort of want to sit down and not get up at all. So,
what do you get anxious? What do you get anxious about? Because if I took myself back to the Dave Bassett that everyone knew in charge of Wimbledon, Sheffield United, and you said abrasive style. I would just say, I'd put a slightly different term on it. I'd say very direct.
Yeah.
I'm not saying confrontational, but you knew what you wanted.
Yeah.
And that would be that I think most people's interpretation of Dave Bassett. So it will come as a surprise to people that you have issues with anxiety. But when you say anxiety, what do you get anxious about?
Making decisions more, which, my wife can't understand. I'm not the guy that she married and went on and everything else. I think, all of a sudden you become a little bit affected, with the tech situation online drives me mad, and dealing with having to pay bills and you can't get on the phone to anybody, you can't speak to anybody, and you then become reliant. And I don't like being reliant. I was never reliant on anybody else because, as you know, when I was in amateur football and playing everything else, I had my own business as an insurance business and I had a building business as well. And that life was no problem to me, but unfortunately it come back and my mum suffered a bit later in life with nerves and lupus and that type of thing. So, that annoys me, but I'm okay. I can get about. I go to a few games and my eyesight's not as good as it used to be, with the numbers. And again, with the football, with the sharpness and everything else, you've got to be on top of it. And,
of course.
I like to be in control. And I mean, really, a lot of the Wimbledon players have got a lot of time for me because they sort of grew up with me and I've told them to buy houses, I did, and a lot of them have been very successful and they're very grateful. And also the Sheffield United boys I'm thought well of as well.
Did you said about the anxiety, Dave, did you ever seek help?
Yes, yeah. I mean, the League Managers Association is terrific. They've got people who help there with all sorts of things. And I tied up with a guy called Alan Johnston, who was very good, who, was sort of come out with ideas. And
what does he do?
He's a sports psychologist, and that he's. I think he's going to the Milan Olympics coming up with the Olympics, and he's been very helpful, in terms of what to do, and to discuss things really, and to sort of, give you confidence, in which he does, as he says. Some of it is what happens just due to your age and everything else. It's quite normal for people to start to lose a bit of confidence and everything else that's gone.
What's his assessment of where you are in life and the issues that you face?
Well, he thinks I've got good perspective in that now, and that I'm he thinks I'm doing reasonably well. He's more optimistic sometimes than I am about it, because I still want to be like I was, but sometimes I obviously realise you can't be, and that you can't do what you've done before. You have to sort of come to grips with it and deal with it, and I have days where I feel good and enjoy it and everything else, like enjoying now, and that there's other days where I sort of worry about things and worry about my daughters and the wife, and which she's been terrific, supporting me and looking after me and everything else. So I've got to get on with it and just hope that you can go out. I mean, it's not like I'm stuck indoors. I make sure I go out and see people. I can't play as much golf as I want to, but I have to accept that as a factor. Probably my problem is I haven't got a lot of hobbies, and I wasn't a reader because I suffer. I didn't know it, but I'm dyslexic. I'm not saying I was bad. I read the newspaper and some of it don't make sense, and I have to go back a second time.
That's not just dyslexia, Dave. That's just reading some of my articles in the past, I think. What would be the lowest point for you? What would be the lowest point when you realised you needed help, or when you were getting help? What's the
I just sort of felt that I needed a bit of help. Really, I just felt that I needed to speak to somebody about it, and you sit down and discuss and do it. So,
but was your mind? Were you lost in a fog or a daze, or you were uncertain about you wanted to do with your life?
No, I wasn't in the lost in a daze. I just felt that I was looking back and I was reflecting. I wasn't being compassionate to myself. I was thinking about all the things that, you know, I should have done this and should have done that. And Alan Johnson said to me, he said, when he was there, he said, I've looked on Wikipedia. He said, you haven't been too bad, have you? You've won promotions, you've done this, you've over 1,000 games. He said, all you've told me is what you should have done. He said, so that's a big error. You know, you're not being compassionate to yourself. You're beating yourself up unnecessarily, and you've got to. And then my accountant and some friends, you know, were saying to me, you know, you've done well from where you've come from and everything else. As a boy brought up in Willesden, you know, with his mum and dad, living with their mum and dad and everything else, to all of a sudden have the career and the great laughs. I mean, you know, Wimbledon was brilliant, and Sheffield United, the atmosphere was, everybody enjoyed coming to work because they enjoyed it. It was a laugh. Everybody got on with it, and they were all determined. And it was a team spirit. We had a great team spirits in those two teams, and we didn't fear anybody. Whoever we played, we didn't frightened at all, you know. And they proved that at Wimbledon, and they proved that at Sheffield United. We won at Liverpool, we've won at Manchester United. You've been to these places, and they've done it and made a career for themselves with players who were discarded, really, in a way.
How big? Last question on this, Dave. But how big a decision was it to go and see a sports psychologist?
Yeah, it was, well, it was easy. I spoke to Richard Bevan at the LMA.
So you didn't think to work, because I think a lot of people would imagine very, very differently about you personality-wise, that would have been a bigger decision. But you said straight away you spoke to Richard Bevan.
I've got to go. Let's go and see what he has to say. Let's see if he can help me. He's there to help. You know, we all go through things in life, and I never thought I would be. As I say, I didn't, but all of a sudden things creep up, and you don't know what your thoughts and your mind. The brain is a very strong thing and determined thing to overcome.
Okay, thanks for talking about all those subjects, Dave, because I know that for a lot of people, it's very, very difficult to talk about issues that people face. But I think people will be surprised, but also I think you'll help a lot of people who will listen to that. On a lighter note, let's go to the press conference. You've been through a few of those over the years. Hopefully this one won't be as combative as some of the ones that you had when you were at Wimbledon, Sheffield United, Nottingham Forest. First question, Alessio Tonato, huge supporter of SACKED and a huge supporter of this show. He's asked, what's the biggest bust-up you've ever had with an owner?
Well, it was somebody I never worked with. I was manager of Barnsley Football Club, and all of a sudden Simon Jordan came in at Crystal Palace, and you know, Stevie Coppell was going to sort of move on, and this, that and the other, and I was you know, a Sky reporter sort of said to me, you know, I know you know Steve, what do you think about it? And I just reacted and more or less said, well, you know, his new owner, one of these people, he'll probably take over the coaching, he'll be doing the back four and the attacking play, you know, he'll get it right and everything else. And he took offence to this, you know, and I shouldn't have said it. I made a mistake. I was being caught at the moment, but, you know, I just felt that, you know, things were changing. And he wrote to my chairman, John Dennis at Barnsley, a letter and, you know, complaining about it and everything else. And John Dennis gave me the letter and said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'll reply to it. And I did. And I just wrote bollocks on his letter and sent it back to him. And, you know, again, I shouldn't have done that. You know, and it wasn't professional, but and then, of course, you know, he's decided to call me a dinosaur and all the bits and pieces, and you know, it was one of those things. He was outspoken, and you know, I reacted, but you know, it wasn't the right thing to do.
No. But you recognise that as well. I mean, obviously, we always regret decisions, and you know, Harry Hindsight's a great person to know, and we post-rationalise so many things, but it's good that Simon is such a prominent and such a big character and larger than life person that you recognise that.
Yeah, well, I thought it. You know, we're looking back, it was wrong. You know, sometimes you have to put your hand up and say, "I've got that wrong." I mean, you know, I made mistakes in my football career. I've made mistakes in the past, and you know, you have to take it on the chin. You know, I should have just left the subject and said, well, you know, what would be, you know, it's up to him. He's the owner of the club. He can do what he wants. Yeah.
Okay. John Williams, another big fan of the show. Transfer window, that's closing. But who was the best player you ever signed in your career as a manager?
Well, there was a lot really that I look back. I mean, they didn't come. I mean, once Dennis Wise, we got he was released. Well, he turned it down. And he fell out with Laurie McMenemy. You know, he's only a young player, and we were well aware of him and that. And you know, he came to Wimbledon and soon put his stamp on the club and turned out to be sold for 1.6 million, you know, which is there. Nigel Winterburn, we got him on a free transfer. He went to Oxford and he was surplus to requirements. We were looking for a left back and he turned out to be a brilliant player. Four times for his 4 seasons at the club. He was player a year every year. And so those two would definitely, be great players that we did. I mean, we bought Fash for 125,000, and after I'd gone, he got sold to Aston Villa for 1.25. I mean, that Wimbledon team amassed over 10 million odd quid, which don't sound nothing now at the moment.
Yeah, but at the time was huge.
Was huge, and the outlay was probably about, couple of 100,000, because as I say, there were players in that team that were come through the youth team.
Yeah. Okay. Sue Collins, she asks, what's your best moment in football? Best favourite moment?
Well, there was a few with the promotions, they're brilliant, winning the 4th Division Championship with over 100 goals and everything else. And, then the following year, it was all there. But, I mean, obviously, when we were in the Championship, which is now League One, winning 1-0 at Huddersfield with about 3 games to go and to be in the 1st Division was... unbelievable. Wimbledon are in the 1st Division playing Manchester United, Liverpool and everything else. Was a great moment, and a good night and everything else. And again, there were so many, like going to Tottenham and winning, going to Chelsea and doing the double, going to Manchester United to win, and going to Liverpool. We did that in our first season. You think of all those clubs and there was great moments, and it was a great time because there was an affinity in the club that we had, Wimbledon. We built that spirit and everything else, and I was lucky to build a similar spirit at Sheffield United as well with that. So they were great times. I enjoyed my life. It was really good, and I certainly can't complain. And it really is, as the psychologist said, you've done well. Well, why you forget what you didn't do, because you've done brilliant with what you have done.
Agreed. No, you had an amazing career as a manager. I know you're comfortable that you finished back in 2005 or sort of around that period of time, but I always felt as we got to know each other that you had so much to offer that you could have carried on. But I need you to say some stories, though, because I'd love to have you back in the owner's box at some stage. But thanks very much for being the guest today. Thanks very much for coming in. I really appreciate the time.
Pleasure. No, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Brought back some memories as we're talking.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks very much. Okay, if you like the show, hit subscribe. You can also become a founding member of Crisis Club FC. Get your golden share, sign up at Patreon. If you like the show, tell us your thoughts, future guests, ideas for the show. We're going to be here every week here on Sacked in the Owner's Box.